Dr. Pasha? Dr. Pasha, we can't hear you. You are muted now. Try to unmute yourself. David, may I request that you attend to the technical issues affecting Dr. Pasha there? In the meantime, I would like to bring in Mr. Chidi. Dada Chidi, to whom does the land belong?
Sorry, chair of the session.
Yes, Mr. Chidi, yes, we are struggling with Dr. Pasha then to take us through the opening. But I have a question that I wanted to direct to you to ask while we are still busy with sorting out Dr. Pasha's technical issues. As to whom does the land belong to?
Well, the land belongs to people who are born into it. If you go to Asia, it should belong to Asians. If you go to any other part of the world, it should belong to people born into originally into that piece of land of the world. So I guess if you come to Africa and this country as well, specifically in the southern tip of the continent, it should belong to Africans born in this country originally. And of course, history, which we can talk about in future, would tell that there are people who came mixed up with us, and we welcome them because the land belonged to us, and at some stage they interfered with that sense of ownership.
Mr. Mashele, from your organization's point of view, why is land so important? And what is your interpretation of the bill as the Azanian People's Organization? Mr. Mashele, are you there? David, come in. David, I see your hand is up. Did you want to say something? We seem to be having some challenges technically this evening. But in any case, let me find out with Dr. Pasha. Dr. Pasha, are you back? Okay, we will have to continue hoping that both Dr. Pasha from PAC and Mr. Mashele from Azapo will join us in due course. Mr. Chidi, you seem to be questioning the issue of compensation with regard to the issue of land. What are your reservations regarding the issue of compensation in this issue of land?
Mr. Martin, is David, just before you proceed with the question to Mr. Chidi, I would just like to advise that I got a message of apology from Azapo. They will not be able to be joining us on time, but then they indicated that as soon as they are sorted with the issues of electricity on their side, they will be able to join us. So for now, we have only two panelists, which is going to be Mr. Chidi as well as Mr. Pitsum Pasha.
Is Dr. Pitsum Pasha back?
I'm still communicating with him to try and assist him with the technical part of things. So as soon as I get it right with him, I'll give you a heads up.
Okay, thank you very much. And apologies once again to our audience for the technical challenges that we are experiencing. Mr. Chidi, can you take this conversation forward then? And in actual fact, before we come to the issue of compensation, I wanted to take it from the question that I asked you earlier to say, then do you think with the current legal paradigm, are we in a position as African people who know and understand that land was taken from us, be it through the just wars or the right of conquest or colonialism? Do you think that the current legal paradigm is sufficient for us to be able to claim back the land as Africans? Mr. Chidi, I'll ask you to unmute yourself.
Oh, yes. No, thank you. May I request that we have some sense of contact, at least those who are guests and the host be on the screen as they talk, so that at least those in attendance would have a feeling of the motion in the discussions. Your question is whether our legal framework is sufficient for us to be able to achieve access to land. Constitutionally, yes, it's sufficient. If you look at the Constitution, it's sufficient, and in my view, it's more than sufficient. Of course, there's always an issue of interpretation, and which is always a problem. And my take of the Constitution has been, it appears that the fact that there were many divided views on whether to amend it or not, it's grounded in the fact that there are people who believe that it's not sufficient. The Constitution, there are people who believe it's sufficient. I'm one of those who believe it's sufficient. But if you look at those who believe it's sufficient, there are those who would be in law and perhaps may have made some special effort to seek to understand it further. And to that extent, the people who say it's sufficient are very minimal in society. And my take is that Constitution should not necessarily be a document or an instrument that is better understood or perceived to be better understood by lawyers. And to some degree, it may have been relevant for the efforts to have been made to amend the Constitution, not because it did not provide for mechanisms through which you could facilitate access to land, but for purposes of certainty, for purposes of trying to close the gap on the divide between those who say it's not sufficient and those who say it's sufficient, but also to avoid the interpretation playing out too much in court on whether the Constitution does permit the state and to what degree to facilitate access to land. So my answer is yes, constitutional, but then the Constitution does not implement itself. The Constitution requires what they call legislation, an act of parliament to start with, and the policies which will flow from such an act of parliament. That's why we seem to have some challenges and serious challenges at that, at the level of an act that is produced by parliament to be able to implement the Constitution. That's why we're looking. That's my answer to your question, if I'm adding justice to the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidi. At this stage, I want to bring in two of our reviewers, and I will start with Mr. Constable Silvedi to first give us an impression on the manual as he went through it. And secondly, Mr. Silvedi, that from your background, it would be very beneficial for all of us to understand why land is such an important issue and the access thereof of Africans is paramount to anything else. Mr. Silvedi?
Am I visible on that side?
Not yet. You are audible, not visible.
Okay.
I
should be now.
It shows like there is a video, but it's dark. It's black. We can't see.
And it was this sabotage. What's happening with the sabotage? Because it started with David for not sending me a link, trying to sabotage me, deny me an opportunity to appear here. It's you now. Putting me in the dark. Let me try and see again. Okay.
Yes, that's better. That's better.
Okay. Thank you very much. Look, I think first I would like to extend the appreciation on the platform that has been created by the visionaries who clearly understand that the actions of today pave a way or make history for the generation of tomorrow. You're not necessarily obsessed about today's benefits, because when we deal with a huge subject like correcting of history, which is this expropriation of land, it's basically correcting of history. It requires us to be very diligent in our action, in our thoughts, and in how we canvass and lobby for a better understanding of the concept that is placed before us. Let me start first, host, by just giving you a broad understanding. I just listened to Mr. Chidi on the legality of the document, which on my side, I want to believe that I would form part of those that he has already said they might find it very limiting. The bill in itself, before we go to the manual that you are trying so hard to debunk the bill, because I going through the manual, one understood the fact that the authors and the reviewers are trying their level best to debunk the bill that is in a way highly limiting but deceitful. If you go through the bill and understand the bill from what might have informed the expropriation bill itself. Because if you look at the bill, you would realize that it still carries the same philosophy or the same line of reasoning as the policy of the willing buyer, willing seller. You might just be using jargons, expropriation, but there's there's absolutely no understanding or a better comprehension of that concept of expropriation as it is used and reflected in the bill itself. The bill's energy and the bill's attitude, it is basically to reinvent the policy which was adopted at the time of Thabo Mbeki of willing buyer, willing seller. If we are going to expropriate, many chapters that are there, from chapter 4, for instance, in the bill, before we go to the manual, that speaks of the intentions and all these other processes that one has to go through. These are the same processes that you would embark on when you were implementing or rolling out the willing buyer, willing seller process of a policy, for instance. So to start, just to start with the legality part of it, first from a layman's point of view, that in itself, it is highly limited. It doesn't require one to be a lawyer or to come from the fraternity before you can understand that, but there are high limitations here. It's just a matter of wordings that had been changed and used interchangeably, but you get to understand the willing buyer, willing seller policy. There's no difference because the attitude of the authors of the bill itself is such that they think when we speak of expropriation, they're thinking of violence and disorder and all this instability that might cause and all those kind of things. When from where one is seated, I would want to differ with them because maybe one thing that we might all want to agree on, it is the passage through which that land should be expropriated. And that's it, because you can't want to undo and rectify history, but at the same time, in how you make decisions, you're not decisive. You're not going to help those that you are trying to get the land from, for instance, to cooperate. Secondly, you are also going to spark more anger that is already there on those that believe they are entitled to a land. And the argument is simple, Mr. Kubia. People are not saying, let's chuck everyone out and take by force. Though the word expropriation, if you are to debunk it, you will understand that it has a coercive, subtle coercive elements on it, which if we were to implement it in pure and mere English, we would be a very violent society in reclaiming back what is rightfully ours. But we are saying, in the spirit of communism, socialism, we need to share the space that is there, arable space that is not utilized, for instance, for those who might want to engage in economic activities and other places, but also the inhabitable space that is there for people to share, because we are growing in population and there is absolutely no space. If you don't see now, if you go to many towns, there's a problem with almost every municipality in our country with regards to the burial site. I want to show you that how important space and land is. The burial site, we are suffocated because the way people are dying, the space is closing off on those demarcated spaces that we usually placed as or demarcated as for our our gone ones or the dead ones. So in essence, I am moved by the energy and the spirit of the authors of this particular manual. They're even saying land reform or expropriation bill a share. That in itself, it says a volume. It says it's people who are conscious of what needs to happen, and they are not going to be fooled by all these consultative or participatory platforms that are created, but created to rubber stamp what we already know. What we already know. So I wanted to open with that, with the overall view on the bill itself, and maybe let me zoom into one or two chapters in the manual. In the manual, as it is a work in progress, I want to believe, because when one goes through it, that's what one picks. On chapter 2, which is the open.
Sorry, Mr. Slibedi, thank you very much. Can you just hold on that thought? And I want to really engage you on your review of those chapters. It will be very much appreciated. But before you do, I just want to bring in here Mr. Matiki and to hear his view as well, his overall view on the manual, and also his contribution and understanding of the expropriation bill. Mr. Matiki? Mr. Khetani?
Audible. Oh, that's not there.
Yes, you are audible. Thank you.
Guys, my lighting is very bad. You'll forgive me, but I'm also very blessed. Black and melanin, so don't be surprised. But I would like to thank the chair, single person taking time, and also the people who
Mr. Matiki, your audio is not really smooth. We struggle to hear you. I don't know if maybe it's an issue of network coverage, but if you can, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, try again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right. But as I was just saying, I would like to thank the organizers of this nice conversation that we have, as well as the opportunity to also speak and offer what I've understood of the manual, and also just a little bit about the bill. I think it is ventures like bring into different spaces where we're African, and we discuss the beneficiaries. Because at the end of the day, products affect us, so I think our children and also visions that our children will also have. And if we don't challenge such bills in terms of the effectiveness of the efficiency and also the purpose in which they've been driven, we will our children will phone us and say we didn't do our job as well. And as a young person, reviewing, allow me to start manual. I've actually just went, I dipped into chapter 2 and 7, 8. And with regards to chapter 2, I think it's a really important chapter because it gives, as a scientist, it's what we call rationality. So it gives context, and it gives the reader the importance of why land is very important. And I think one thing that we very much have been disadvantaged, especially as the younger generation, that we have never seen our parents or our grandparents own land, or the extent in which those practicing the land
Mr. Matiki, sorry to interject. Your audio is really, it started well, but now it's back to where it was. I'm not sure what challenges you might be experiencing there, but we want to hear your views. We really want to hear your views. I will ask David to be in touch with you.
Okay.
Yes, to be in touch with you and try to sort out the audio problem. David, please, can you try and assist Mr. Matiki there? Thank you very much. Mr. Silvedi, I really wanted to hear Mr. Matiki's views as well before you could delve into the chapters on the manual. And I'm going to use this opportunity to allow you to proceed from where you ended. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kubian. Look, informally, when we were discussing with David, the interest was more on chapter 2 and I think chapter 8 in the manual. How do we fine tune or add or subtract, but basically how do we review all in the quest to beef up the manual so that it is a heavy document that is competitive, but also trying to lower down the abstract language that has been used in the bill itself. That, like I was saying earlier, to say it has element of deceit if you're not careful, and it is incumbent upon us, those who might at least be able to have relationship with literature, to be able to tone it down a bit, helping our people to understand what is that we are dealing with. From where I'm seated, I realize that we citizens carry different meaning of what is this bill seeks to achieve. Because I was hoping that ASAPO and maybe other political parties will be able to come and contribute it so that we try to find each other. Because the biggest challenge that we are having, Mr. Kubian, is that the understanding of expropriation of land by politicians might not be the same understanding as the expropriation of land by poor citizens who are directly affected by this. Now, when I looked into the questions raised in chapter 2 of the manual, and I realized that maybe one of the things that we might want to start with before we can deal with the importance of the land, because the importance of the land in itself, it is suggestive of the activities that one can run and conduct once you have the land. And if you are not careful about focusing on the activities that comes with the land, we might miss an important and central part of defining the land itself. I think I can't remember if it's I think it's Mr. Mashele who when you asked him the question around the understanding of land, and as in like where to who does the land belong to? I think that was the question, and he correctly coined it But his answer was also encompassing the real definition of what is land before we can deal with other aspects. We need to start there and say, what is land in our own definition? From a layman's point of view, what is that you can be able to say, which you can include, for instance, in the manual, so that you start sparking the interest of ordinary people on the ground by allowing them to define what is land according to them. And he mentioned something very important. He might have not coined it the way I'm going to explain it to you now and the panelists, but the issue around identity, the importance of land vis-a-vis the identity. I wanted to start there to say, perhaps that is in reviewing chapter 2. The first issue that we need to deal with, it is to explain what is land. Because to us, land, we are not missionaries. A missionary might not have a same understanding of a land like myself as a residential. Missionary is somebody who carries a particular mandate and they run around the world passing whatever agenda that they're passing. As a residential human being, to me, land is regarded as my identity as a person. From where I was born, that defines me. The landscape of where I was born, it defines me. It carries my identity. Even it influences the culture thereof. Where you were born, the land, the identity where you were born, it even defines the culture because of various things, climate, your landscape around there. In KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, because it's humid, warm, the landscape that side is mountainous and whatnot, people would find it ordinarily normal to wear their skin clothes and whatnot. But you go to Lesotho, where it's cold and then so they would not have privy to wear skins. Otherwise, they would get some parts of their bodies will be damaged, would be severely damaged by the cold. So the environment, the land, which defines their identity, also defines how should they live out their identity in that particular space. And I think if we put more energy in trying to deal with the meaning of land before we can go to the importance of land, which is what one would like to contribute into the manual. I'm not sure, but I want to believe, because we would be allowed an opportunity to send through certain views in addition to the current advocacy as carried in the manual. So I wanted us to start there to say, maybe let's stress ourselves first with that, so that once we are done with the meaning of land, because it would mean different things to different people. Like I'm saying, if we start understanding it from the point of identity, it will certainly take us somewhere. Then as when we go and we move to the importance of land, to a politician, to EFF, to ANC, the importance of land might not be the same to me, because they might be talking about maybe agricultural activities that one needs to run there. Hence, they fight to say, but there's a vast land that is occupied by one person. and there is absolutely no agricultural activities that are happening there and whatnot. But if you go, for instance, to somebody who is from Muruleng, who goes to Tshwane to seek homage and be active in the economy of the country there, you provide that person with land, and to them, the activity, the first activity or the first importance of that particular space that you are giving to them is a shelter. So by the time we get to that variation of the importance of land according to different people, I would urge that we park all our energies in defining this thing that is land, because if we miss an opportunity to understand how land defines our identity, it would be very difficult for us to argue why do we want land, which is the case now. We losing the argument on the basis that everyone comes from a different point of view, and we don't seem to be coming together. Some are doing it for political reasons. Some are doing it for academic reasons, to be seen, to be known, because they are better off. Like panelist was saying earlier, to say, you find those that are in a legal fraternity, for instance, understand themselves to be better off with regards to grappling with these concepts that are enshrined in the Constitution. And now Constitution, to a large extent, is made for ordinary minds and ordinary people. It just needs those who had the privilege of going to school to translate it and put it down, lower it a bit to them. They seem to be nothing difficult if we are to move in that particular direction. I would like to pack it here on this first chapter, which is chapter 2, on how can we better reconstruct the chapter to have a proper opening that would assist us to be able to embrace all other issues that are raised in that particular chapter. Because when we go to chapter 8, I think I'm not sure if Dr. Kubiani, you are still allowing, because I tend to talk a lot, and very charismatic somebody, especially when you speak about something that are very close to my heart, sir. So I wanted to take back the ropes to the Honorable DJ Martin Kubiani to also allow other participants to share their view on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silibedi. We appreciate your deliberations on this matter. Let me try Mr. Matiki again before I invite Mr. Chidi for his reaction to what rather to Mr. Silibedi's contribution. Mr. Matiki, can you try without the video, and perhaps you are audible this time, because we really want to hear your views.
Am I audible, Chair? Am I audible?
It sounds better, but let's try.
Okay. Apologies, colleagues. I'm not really sure what's actually happening on my side.
But it's much better.
I hope I'll be much more clear this time.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's excellent. But before I got cut off, I'm not sure at which point, but I'll just start also just again to thank to be invited into such a platform. And what I was saying before I got cut off was that I reviewed chapter 2, 7, and 8 of within the manual. And I think the previous speaker covered quite a lot with regards to the bill, so I won't lean anything within the bill. I'll just deal with my thoughts around what was the thinking what did I understand from the thinking of the authors, and then what do I relate it to, and which were the parts which I felt were quite important that were outlined, and should have a clearer. It's good to also have clearer understandings around it, and then how should we challenge it, and if so, what do I think how it should be challenged? I think on the second chapter, I think for me it's a very important chapter. In fact, it's my favorite out of those I've reviewed, because as young people who have never had the opportunity to watch our parents and grandparents own a vast amount of land, or a certain amount of land beyond the scope of the house which our houses are built in. Sadly, if it's rented, then of course now even the trauma of being landlessness also extends to that, you know. But it gives us a context, and as a scientist will say, a rationale of why land is important. And it outlines the spiritual, the socioeconomic, and also the socioeconomic impact of what having land brings. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be carried out to the young people, because if we are to galvanize ourselves in such a way that we are to make an effective change to the point that land is going to be expropriated rightly in according to the definitions of Mr. Chidi, which I do agree with around who are the owners of the land. We need to also have a clear sight in which we have debunked the understanding of what is the importance of land to each and every person. And I think the previous speaker also highlighted that there's differences in terms of individuals, of why land is important to you. You know, in my state, I might think I might need it for farming because I need, you know, for somebody else, they feel like this is they believe that it's the land of their grandfathers and this is where they should have been buried and so forth. You know, so it has a spiritual attachment to it, you know, and all of these things, once we give cognizance to them and give them a certain amount of importance and put the information out there, it starts to give the young mind also, and also the older individuals who are almost tired of fighting this battle. It gives them a bit of motivation for them to understand that this bill, it needs to be taken care of. We need to challenge it in order for us to get to an expropriation that is equitable to all of the Africans who are the very much the people who are the owners of the land. And then there were two components which stood out for me. The first one, which I'm going to mention, it's something that was mentioned when we were speaking, we're having a book review by around April last week at the commune. And it is something that it's an art that has been lost. And one of the first recommendations the chapter makes is that we should start with organizing ourselves, you know. And I think one of the things which the older generation that comes before us, one or two generations that comes before us, what they did very excellently is that when they had an thought, they had an idea, they had something they had to challenge, they organized themselves in such a way that they were able to make meaningful impact, in such a way that they were able to address issues with one voice. And that is one way in which I think, that is one thing in which I think we've done badly over the last couple of years. And it is something that starts from our own homes. It is something that moves from our own homes to our schools, into what we teach our children, into what they get taught, and then into us who have the privilege of going to university. And yes, we may hold very nice, beautiful degrees, but there is still a good amount of people who are very much de-invested into the issues that affect them, and one of them being the land. And the last, which is the second point, I think I've already touched on it, will be around awareness, you know. And as I said, this chapter brings in context. And then are we pushing that awareness to the right places? For example, right now we are having a conversation around the land as people who are likely, most of us, sitting in cities. Who is going to talk to the people in the villages about the importance of the land? You know, not why aren't we taking such conversations of socialism and communism back also to the people who also who have got less access to these conversations? That's my contribution to chapter 2. And with regards to chapter 7 and chapter 8, takes a bit more of a legal perspective. You know, it draws from the legal holes within the bill. And with chapter 7, what it deals with, the author tries to outline, he outlines the cases in which the bill speaks about a compensation won't be paid. And the argument that is put forth were these two of them. The first one is around the wording, and I think that's the common issue around the bill. But we will pick particularly in clause 12, wherein the author speaks around the using of the word nil instead of no payment. Because I understand though that concern in terms of nil payment also creates a perception as if even though it's a zero amount that has been paid, but it seems as if in a certain circumstances that nil will change into a value of compensation. And I think it's one thing that can be challenged. The second part, I hope, Chair, I'm not also exceeding my bundles as well. The second part, it deals with an aspect which will lean onto chapter 8 as well. It leans onto the part of mechanisms that have been put in place due to language, that have been put in place that have the potential to frustrate, I quote, frustrate transformation and the expropriation of land. And the argument becomes also around cases in which, yes, land won't be paid, but also the part wherein if there's an improvement to a certain piece within the land, the bill doesn't make provisions to actually explain that will it be paid or not. But in the case, it becomes arguable that compensation is likely to be paid. But at the same time, I think the people argue that against this topic would say, no, this improvement was made, yes, you have to pay. But at the same time, we need to think around the fact that those improvements were made on the land based on the provisions of the land in most cases, if not all cases. So anyway, the owner of the land or the rightful owner of the land at that time was anyway, even with those improvements, as continued beneficiary of the land. So hence, why should my question become, why should compensation be paid in that sense? And going to the last chapter which I reviewed, which was chapter 8, it spoke around the clause of the land being attached to a certain date or being mortgaged by a certain bank and so forth, or under a certain financial institution. Let me excuse my poor English. That also becomes another mechanism, as quoted, that can frustrate the expropriation of land. Now the bank, it of course would use the land as a surety for if the individual is likely to default for payments for the loan that they've taken against the land. And of course, in a sense of that land, that if that land was to be expropriated, of course, you would have a situation wherein now the state has to pay compensation for that. So in some sense, it becomes a mechanism in which those who are the owners of the land can use to ensure that they receive compensation for the land when it is compensated, when it is expropriated. And in final remarks, so that I can hand over, I don't like overstepping my part. But in final remarks, I think the idea of expropriation should always be around reparations. And it's something that we need to include within the language when we explain the importance of land and why we should also get it in the bill and what it should say in order for it to be equitable and also reparate the land appropriately to the people who have been disadvantaged. And what I picked up, what the author in the last two chapters, as I said, the wording was the part which the author emphasized, that we should challenge it in such a way that the wording does not protect transformation and expropriation from happening accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Matigi, thank you very much for your contribution, and I think it was worth it to wait for your thoughts on this matter. Let me try again, Mr. Mpasha. Dr. Pito, are you there? No, I think Dr. Mpasha is having challenges with his technology. As I can see him on the screen, but he's not audible. Mr. Chidi, your reaction to the reviewers, sir.
If I may check, Chair of the session, do we have the representative from Azapo?
David, can you confirm?
No, we still don't have them. We still don't have them.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. And by the way, from the very beginning, when we were engaged, we were advised that this process should be as engaging as it has become, and that the contributors of the manual should, each one of them, participate in the deliberations. That's why I was asking whether there is a representative from Azapo. Look, I've had Constable. I thought it's Constable from SAPS, South African Police Services. My brother, the review in summary is that they are further views that may be made as supplementation to Chapter 2. I agree that the space for such. I mean, if you say somebody should go and produce some work somewhere, the person will come back with whatever they think. And if you take the same work and you give it to 100 people, they will have different views. But those views would make you wiser, make you richer, would make you a better human being. And in what you want to do, the advocacy work, perhaps your work would be embittered. So for that reason, if those views were to be expressed, the design of the manual is that it should benefit an African in the sense that when we engage on advocacy, it should be such that in the end, Africans benefit from partly the work that we did, partly the work that Constable would have contributed, and many others. So such contribution is more than welcome. And of course, I mean, when you go and you say you're a singer, there are people who may like your song. There are people who may like your dance, but not your song. All of that. So we are amenable to. I think Dr. Mpasha is in motion. He appears to be in motion because there's some audio that comes.
Yeah, he has muted himself. Yes, he's back.
Yeah,
he has muted himself.
Yeah. Well, it's fine now. Thank you. So any contribution is more than welcome, and of course we appreciate that, and we believe that at the time when we start with the actual further work that we'll be doing, flowing from the publication of the manual, we'll have more contribution from many others, including Constable. Brother Keteni, look, you are right. You are right, because there are many things that we can do flowing from the manual, but also your contribution and many others' contribution as well. Because as I said just a few minutes ago, the purpose is to ensure that the little that we've been able to produce It's something we can rely on in the work that we'll be doing going forward. And we make sure that others' contribution is also welcomed. And in the process of doing that, you need some sense of unity. Unity, not so much because we agree with each other in respect of everything, but unity for the purpose of achieving one thing, for the purpose of achieving the state of land equality, something that is enshrined in the Constitution. If you read the preamble to the Constitution and Section 1 of the Constitution, you'd be shocked why, as a country, we are so divided when we have committed to ourselves that we should build a society that is based on the achievement of equality, that is based on human dignity, and of course the enhancement of freedom. One part says freedom, the other part says freedoms. Now this freedom would include land freedom, would include economic freedom, and all other freedoms. And the reason why the three weights are put together, human dignity, equality, as well as freedom, is because it's a free person who would enjoy dignity, being equal with others. And you can't achieve these things if you don't have land. So the galvanizing of support, of course, is always difficult. And of course, in any cause, you don't necessarily need many people, but the few with whom you can walk the journey. At a time when you're tired, they take on the baton, and when they're tired, you take on the baton as you run. And you know what do you call it, in athletics, you run the baton and give it to the next person, and all of that. It's team spirit. It shows that you may not be able to run the course to the finish, but if you work together, indeed, you might be able to register some success. That's in essence my response to the contribution. Thanks, Chair of the session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidi. Mr. Mpasha, it seems like you are with us. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you. And can you confirm, can you say something so that I do not make an assumption that is not tested?
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, certainly that.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Maybe perhaps just before I could say anything, because I think this technology and technical things, they have not been friendly to me since the start of this. For that, let me just say I apologize, although it was technological issues. But secondly, let us say, as a leader of the PAC in this province, that we will never stop to praise AJA on this particular initiative, because this is what has been needed all along. So we are thankful that this is being created, and we believe and trust that as and when we continue to educate and conscientize the African people will begin to understand the importance of the land. People will begin to understand that indeed land is the source of food security. But now, as and when I was listening to the reviewers, the main issue that was arising is the definition of the land. So that is why we define it appropriately as everything. Because when you define the land as an everything, you, like now when the reviewer was indicating that when you go to somebody who's find the rural areas who need residential resin place, so to that person, land will be for residential purposes. But as when you are saying land is everything, you are able to cover all aspects, because it can be used for residential purposes, it can be used for grazing, it can be used for economic generating activities, it can be used for industrialization, it could be used for farming, for mining, everything. That is what we put it into context, because we're doing so. And also, one thing before I forget, he also pointed out issues around culture, and that is very important. Hence, that is why we have always said that we should not be defined according to our color of skin, because we, as you were saying, that the weather conditions from various corners will not be the same, and so as a result, even our appearance will not be the same. So I wanted to also touch on that aspect, but in short, I will say land is quite very important for spiritual purposes. Land is it's important for our own dignity, for our own identity, as the reviewers have indicated. So, but with regard to this bill, really it defines, it spells out what we have been told about issues of democracy. Remember when from 1994, issues around, we've been sold that there is democracy. People thought we will live in peace. People thought we will live, enjoy and have access to reliable water. People thought that we will have access to jobs. But because we have not addressed the fundamental issue, which is the source for even the electricity, as I had to move from point A to point B because of load shedding, is the source of food security. When you sick today, or you are going to the hospitals, they will tell you eat healthy food, eat organic food. But where do those food comes from? They come from the land. And if you do not have access to land, what will happen to you? You will be a victim of those that are fixing prices, selling the food that are recommended to you for health purposes, are selling them at higher prices. That is why we say land is everything. And that is why we must be united as the African people in this cause to reclaim our land, because it addresses, the land question addresses every aspect of our lives, and this should be our uniting factor. So we must begin to also conscientize majority of the African people who are today, because of lack of land, are ill because they are not consuming sufficient food. And we must conscientize to them and show them that due to landlessness, we are sick because we are consuming genetically modified foods. We are not consuming organic food. We don't get enough food to eat because we are landless. We do not have those that want to start business. They don't have a place to start businesses because we do not have the land. As I wrap up, when you go to the most of the African people have got animals, they've got cattle, but they don't have where these animals could graze. That is why when you go to the rural areas, those cattle are very slim. And the very same people who have robbed us of our land, they come back. See how this thing is systematic. They come back and buy your own cattle at a very lesser price, because we are suffering from as a result of landlessness. Had we had the land, our cattle should have had proper places to graze, and we will be benefiting as well and generating enough from the auctions and so many other things. So all I'm saying is that it addresses all aspects of life. So I try to touch various aspects, farming, residential, and other things. But as and when we continue to engage on this, obviously we'll be able to touch base with various aspects. And you'll also pardon me because I've just indicated that we had experienced this load shedding. My video is not as it's supposed to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpasha. You are indeed forgiven for the bad video, but the important aspect, and which is hearing your views, I think it has been captured. Perhaps at this stage, I should also allow anyone from the floor, from our viewers who want to engage, to raise up their hand, and they will be recognized as such. But while you are still raising your hand, I just want to again pose this question to Mr. Slibeti to say, before he gives us a bid-eye view on the review of Chapter 8, to say, if we agree as Black South Africans, as Black people, that land is important, number one, and two, it has been taken away from us through various means. Mentioned earlier the right of conquest, just wars, colonialism. Later on, the Heights, apartheid, and all that. So we agree that land has been dispossessed. We have been dispossessed of land. And why is it that we find it difficult to unite as Black people in pursuing this cause of reclaiming back the land? We have the majority of Black people in Parliament, and this ties up to the question I asked Mr. Chidi earlier, when I asked if the legal paradigm is it ripe for us to expropriate the land? Because my logic tells me now that if someone from whoever or from wherever they come from gets into this country to dispossess us of our land, and with that instill the colonial laws and colonial frameworks of how nations and countries should be run. And later on, we regain consciousness and to say, no, this is our land, we want our land, but we still use the same process that they came with, and not the African law or understanding of law to try and reclaim and expropriate land. Are we ever going to succeed? So that is the context in which I asked Mr. Chidi, and I was not disputing the legal framework that is available, but is it our legal framework? And what is it that our legal fraternity, and in particular, the Black people within the legal fraternity, are trying to do to try and ensure that African legal systems are part and parcel of how countries are run? So coming back to your question, to the question I want to pose, Mr. Silibedi, is that why do we find it so difficult to unite? We are the majority in parliament, regardless of the background of the creed of the political organization. We are majority Black, yet there seems to be no unity in our voice in order to try to ensure that we address this very urgent matter, which is land. Mr. Silibedi.
Thank you once again, Chairperson. I think it's not necessarily a difficult question for one to answer. I should be very short when answering what could be the cause of the disunity. Though we claim to be united in understanding, we claim to be united in the knowledge of how cruel our land was taken from our forefathers and foremothers. The central problem with regards to this subject of land, it is the politics of the country, the political landscape, the fraternity in that political fraternity itself. I think they lack conscience. I want to be, because we most of political parties are populist in character. So where populism dominates, consciousness becomes demeaned, because you are not driven by purpose. In a populist world, you are not driven by purpose. You are driven solely by ambition. And that in itself will show you how sad our political landscape is in our country, the quality of politicians, the thinking capacity of our politicians in our country. Mostly are following this populism route that has destroyed the oxygen, and it had sucked the oxygen out of the political system of our country. The argument around this, they are always politicking about everything. Because if you were to understand land as a matter of life and death, like previous speakers have alluded to that fact, we should not even be having different views. There should actually be two contesting views. The expropriator view and those that should give the land view, which are the minority. And if we were to impress upon the democratic principle, majority rule, the minority would suffocate when it comes to that. It doesn't mean that we are saying we should not give heed to their argument because they are minority. Their argument will fall flat on the basis that we are rectifying history, and in rectifying history, there can't be any distortion. Otherwise, we are damaging history further. But the politicians in our country, yes, Chairman, the quality of politicking in our country. It's very upset. It's very upset. It is full of individuals who uses basic needs to campaign. You know, somebody coming to you and telling you when they contact door to door that you vote for them, they'll allocate land for you, you vote for them, they'll give you water and electricity. Those are enshrined rights. These are things that we should not be politicking about. In fact, such a person, I would take out my stick. You are not going to campaign to me about my constitutional rights. Those are constitutional, but that is the sad reality, because the thinking capacity in there, I can say it's limited, or it's rather dry. I think we having a generation of leaders that are generally lazy. They are allergic to exploring and thinking that because you are leaders, you think that those that you are leading as voters can't think. That's one of the things to say, but why are they even so arrogant and undermining the intelligence of ordinary citizens of this country? Do they know what is that ordinary citizens of this country can produce? I mean, this that we are talking about today, it's an example to that. It's an example to that fact. To say individuals who are willing to contribute to the discourse of the country decides to sit somewhere, identify each other, and come up with a document of this magnitude. This document, don't underestimate this document that you have just produced, this that we are discussing, this manual. I'm telling you, if we were to take that particular posture, this country can go far. But because of the competing populism in political space, we miss out on very minute but very significant things. They might appear to be small, but they are highly significant to the majority of our people. I think that would be my answer in attempting to satisfy the question of why then are we differing? Yeah, we are led through deceit. Each and every space, it is deceitful. Every person is for themselves. You leave that space that I've just spoken about, the political space. You go to another space, the religious space, for instance. Deceit too. Because even in the religious space, we are still contesting the issue of land. Where should churches be erected vis-a-vis the recreational spaces and all those kind of things that builds a society? Why do we allocate land to these particular individuals that we don't even know where they come from? When there's a queue in our country of people who are waiting for land, but somebody with some funny name from somewhere, they come and erect their Kuku church somewhere there. We're not saying we are against that. We're not against religion. We are not against churches. But we are saying, as we are fighting for basic usage of the land, now you add and having all these other, because there are deceitful agendas that are being used in seizing the space. So I think in that we will not be able to find each other. Not at all. We are not going to be able to find each other.
Yeah.
But on the chapter 8, I think they've previous speakers have done justice to chapter 8, and those are the cues that I wanted to take to in regards to the chapter 8 in the review. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silibedi. I just want to check one last time from AZAPO if there is any representative from AZAPO. And if there is anyone from the floor that would want to make a contribution to the discussion before we wrap up and close. Okay, I take it that we don't have anyone from Azapo. Mr. Chidi, your very short last words. Okay, just before Mr. Chidi, I see M. Boreka Motlante. You are welcome. You are welcome. Please unmute yourself.
Apologies, sorry. I came in very late, I was traveling, but I picked up the debate down the line. My take on the issue of land and with regard to the issue of expropriation, I look at it from a very extreme point of view. I like the perspective that says land is everything. Land is about sovereignty. African kingdoms lost their sovereignty when they lost the land. They did not lose political rights. They lost the land. They became people who were conquered. So the way I look at the issue of land is to say, in the first, we have not, as Black people, decided what kind of regime we want with regard to the land. What do we want? Do we want to continue with this system of title deeds as we have in the Western European kind of regime? Are there other land regimes in the world that are different from the current one that we're using? We have not yet decided on that. What we have is, it seems everyone is agreed that what we are going to have is people having title deeds and then a land being something that we exchange amongst ourselves. That approach in itself has got its own downside in that it's possible for someone to come and buy almost all the land as a foreigner. Do we become a conquered people based on land again? So we need to, as Black people, agree, are we going to have this land regime continuing, or are we going to look for a different land regime? For instance, in China, you have the right to use land. You don't have the right to own land. The right to use land, like we have the PTO that we have now, is a permission to occupy. That is a right to use. Do we want an expropriation bill that says, we'll give you the title deed, and when you have the title deed, we can just come back and buy the land back from you? What will be the purpose? Does it take us a step forward with regard to undoing the conquest? And I always think in a different way. I looked at the Freedom Charter and the Constitution that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. South Africa as a country has belonged to all who live in it, but the land in that country does not belong to all who live in it. So let's separate the country from the land. As it is currently, land needs to be looked at as part of our sovereignty. The way it's being configured, it actually undermines everything that we do. You cannot even talk about economic emancipation, economic freedom of the Black people if you do not address the issue of land. You can have your BEE, you can have your short-term gap measures until we address the issue of land, access to land, use of land, and have a proper regime. Like I said, I come from a very extremist point that says we need to, and it's not even about expropriation. It's just to say all ownership of land vests in the country and in the state. And the state needs to develop mechanism to regulate access and use of land. That way it becomes easy in the sense that if I have a right to use this land and I can always request access to use the land, We know the politics may be wrong, the corruption may undermine a lot of things, but we cannot shy away from the need to change the regime on land. It will change nothing. A person can still have 99-year lease on that land that can be renewed if the family continues or the business continues. But we need to agree on the proper regime, and then everything follows from there. That's the unity that we need now. Let's agree on the regime, and then we'll then take everything forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Baraka Matlanti. Much appreciated. I also saw a hand. I don't know if it was from Jeriel Matabat. Did I see your hand right, Jeriel? If you can hear me, you can unmute yourself. Perhaps I saw wrongly. Thank you very much, Dade Matlanti. Mr. Chidi, your last words, and then I will give Mr. Silibedi as well his last word, and Mr. Mpasha. Very briefly, thank you very much.
It's maybe sorry, can I be, my battery is running very low. If
okay,
you don't mind, I can just take the last.
All right. Okay, yes. So you are welcome, Mr. Mpasha. Go through.
No, thanks. Thanks very much for agreeing to this. Really, we must understand that we are disunited because we don't know what is land. We don't know the importance of land. And unfortunately, the settlers who are preserving these neo-colonial systems, they know the importance of the land. As we just think that the land is just these grasses and the beauty of it, the trees, we must begin to educate and educate before, and that will lead us to unity. When people understand what is the land, how important is the land. These grasses is just the beauty that attract us. When it's like we usually, when you meet across a man or a woman, so you get that attracted by the beauty, but the inner beauty that you also talk about is these resources that are underneath the land. That is why we say the land, it's everything buried and everything above the land, including our natural gases, including the water that we were talking about, minerals. So we must begin to educate our people that land, it's everything buried, it is everything above. The settlers came here because as when they were working, they got attracted by the beauty of Africa. And when they settled, they realized, but there is this inner beauty. Let us be united, educate, so that we benefit from this inner beauty. And lastly, when it comes to political parties, we are unable to unite because we do not understand the importance of land, but also that these other parties are established because they are a project to preserve the systems. So it goes back to the identity that my brother, one of the reviewers, because of the challenges, I forgot the name, was talking about. So you cannot expect an organization that is established, that is its identity, for the purpose of preserving this neo-colonial system that renders Africans landless, to be united and rally behind the issue to restore the land. That we have a lot of the projects that are in parliament that are established for the purpose of preserving this system. So what we have to do, let us go and educate about what land is, how important is the land is, and what we can benefit from the land. Then you'll begin to see the unity that we all wished. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mpasha, and for your contribution. Mr. Silibedi, briefly, I will request you to give us your last comment, please.
Thank you. Let me just join the chorus, particularly on chapter 8 in the manual, in concluding my contribution. That the same energy that is being carried in chapter 8, which seeks to advise and advocate the rejection of the current bill in its current form, on the basis of the compensations and the wishy-washy approach that is being suggested by the expropriation bill in rectifying the history. I would want to really support that and put emphasis on the fact that we can't be this expropriation bill in its current form. It is the same as willing buyer, willing seller, willing buyer policy, which was adopted a few years back in our country. So it's not going to help. We should actually reject the bill as it is with that energy. And thank you very much. I just hope that the protest which was organized to reject the signing of electoral bill into an act today, it actually succeeded. But I am willing if the same course is to take place, because this bill is not going to help us in anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Slibedi. We really appreciate your contribution. Before Mr. Chidi, I see Jeriel Matabata from Azapo as resurfaced. Mr. Matabata, I'll give you briefly your contribution, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that many people have taken my words. Unfortunately, I work for the Department of Agriculture and also the Deputy Chairperson of AZAP. I think that we must take this thing further. I think I support every speaker who has spoken. I think that they are right. Let me just pause here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chidi, your closing comment and the way forward.
Thanks, Chair, for this opportunity. I think many have expressed their views. The intention was to get views in addition to what we have expressed as the authors of the manual. We have really reduced into writing what we think, and individuals who contributed on this platform have expressed their view of what we've indicated, but they obviously would go beyond that and express their own view of what should happen insofar as land reform is concerned. May I just take this opportunity just to indicate, and this is in respect of what my brother Mtlante indicated, that the unity should be on how we define what we want, something to that effect. But somebody may have a different view. The unity should not be limited to, I should not be rigid and say this is what should unite us. My take is that let's unite, but in the process of uniting, there are people who will come from the EFF, they will have a different view. The people who come from Azapo, they will have a different view. But if what we want to achieve, regardless of our social origin, political origin, and other societal segments from which we are drawn, regardless of our views, if what we want to achieve will put an African at the center, that is what, in my view, should inform the action that we ought to take. This time around, we're talking about this bill, but this bill is just one piece of an intended legislation that has been produced by the parliament. There's more, unlawful entry bill and many others, which may too require us to unite in an effort to cause land reform to be effected. I mean, there are those who, as my brother Constable has just indicated about the electoral bill, they united because in the main it's too easy to unite. When we talk political rights, they united and they had a demonstration. They have a cause, and what they do, they come together, unite, work together, and fight what they believe to be the cause. So should be the case with us. If politicians are not with us, as Constable has indicated, they are not with us. What do we do as people perhaps who are not in parliament, and some of us who are not in politics? Come together with people in politics, in football, in all these things. I see there's the president of SAFA here in Limpopo, because his constituency is important. You need football grounds in society for children to have space to play in town, in rural areas, and all of that. So all of us are affected by landlessness. And to that extent, where there's need for us to work together, regardless of our strongest opinion on specific issues, we still should be able, in my view, come together and work together. I remember when we started with Azapo and the PAC, one of the things we had to do was, what is the meaning of expropriation? We differed over that. But in the end, we agreed, this is just English. And it's not even coined by us. We learned it as it came through the ship. Why should we divide it over English? What is it that we can do together, regardless of the material we read, which base our thinking, and which is not in the main even African? What is it that we can do to identify solutions at least, and work together on the solutions, regardless of our ideological, political, theoretical, and philosophical differences? And indeed, that agreement and understanding led us to produce this product. And I can tell you, if you were to hear somebody in Azapo, in the PAC, in Aja, deliberating elsewhere, you may not think that these people produced the same work. But what was the purpose? The bill is the focus. Beyond the bill, what is it that we can do to achieve the attainment of land reform? So thank you so much for the contribution, and to the chair of the session, thanks for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Chidi. I would like to once again extend my deepest appreciation to the contributors and the reviewers of the manual. I thank you all. This is the platform for us to really bring the minds together, as Mr. Chidi has said, and I will take nothing away from what he said and allow David Mathieu to once again give the vote of thanks and the word of closure. Thank you very much from myself. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Mr. Martin. We had a beautiful engagement. Just before I proceed to the conclusive remarks, I would just like to share one or two comments that have been shared in our comment box. We have one comment from Mahatla Tipa. She says in her comment, more advocacy is needed to conscientize our people about the importance of land, especially those in the rural areas, because when one looks at the state of community property association, one will realize that there is a need to raise awareness to our people about the importance of land. This platform is very much appreciated because it seeks to unite the organizations that speaks about bringing the land back to the rightful owners. Perhaps AJA will be the catalyst to bring the Black consciousness movements bloc together with the Azanian movements bloc to assist in the fight to bring the land to the rightful owners. The only way to bring back the land is when Africans unite. We also have one last comment from Buroka Montana, who says, this is my land, I want it back, they can keep their country. That sums up the comments that we have had. Without any further ado, I understand we've kept you much longer than we had anticipated we will. but then we'd just like to appreciate from the Africana Justice Association, we'd like to appreciate your patience in being with us this long. Also, if you don't have the manual as of yet, can drop us an email to get the manual. The email is info@africana.co.za. I'll repeat the email again, is info@africana.co.za, or you can simply communicate with the person that has invited you to the event. You can have access to my number, and then we'll be able to take it from there in terms of sharing the manual. As Africans, I would like to say it's good evening, and thank you very much for being with us for this long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.